30 years ago, it was Vectan treachery and aggression that led to the slaughter of 1 billion Hellcast lives.
You have no idea how sickening this is to us. Forced to live here, alongside the people who destroyed our planet.
Right then, Simon, isn't this exciting? Our first PlayStation 4 review.
It depends how you define exciting.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about Killzone Shadowfall. And just in case you don't know, we're changing the format of our Let's Talk shows. Instead of kind of rambling on for half an hour, and giving away loads of kind of plot points and little spoilers sometimes we touch on, what we're going to do is we're going to give a summary of what we think of this game, followed by a rating, and then we're going to go into a more in-depth chat, in-depth talk about this launch title.
Are we allowed to give a different review for the multiplayer compared to the single player?
No, I'm just doing it all as one. Because you don't buy them separately, so I've taken both into account though.
Yeah.
So I've got some. I've got
a bit of a spiel.
Yeah, I've put my thoughts down on the paper. I've come prepared, which isn't like me. Isn't like me at all.
It's not like anyone that we know.
No, Christ. But no, I've put something down just to kind of make sure I have all my I cover everything I want to talk about. So Killzone Shadowfall. Basically, Guerrilla Games have rebooted Sony's flagship shooter for the new generation, giving us what is ultimately a game of two halves. Right off the bat, you have the campaign, unfortunately, which stretches on for about 8 to 10 hours, and towards the back end of it, it does feel like it is starting to outstay its welcome, so that's a reasonable length for it. The story itself follows on from Killzone 3 and finds the Hellgast, a warlike human faction, not so subtly disguised, but basically they're space Nazis with English accents. It finds them without a homeworld due to a cataclysmic act that had presumably taken place at the end of the third game. Left with no choice, the good and not so subtly American Vectan faction take them in on their own planet, giving them half of their homeworld to settle on. I don't know why, but they do.
I really don't get it.
Having not really played any of the previous games in the series, I took a lot of this backstory on face value and just accepted it for what it was. So basically the campaign, Shadowfall's campaign, starts on the night when the Hellgast are forcefully evicting the native Vectans from the areas they've been gifted with to live on. And you play the role of a small boy who's being smuggled out of the zone by his father, trying to avoid the Hellgast patrols. What really follows is a stilted tutorial mission and predictable story arc, which sees you being taken into the protection of the Shadow Marshals, who are a Vectan division of special forces, the kind of secret police for the Hellgast side of the planet, the kind of secret agents who sneak onto the Hellgast side and see what's going on. Things then quickly jump forward around 20 years, and your little boy character, Lucas, is now a horribly generic white male soldier who happens to be a Shadow Marshal himself. And the campaign kicks off in earnest. Now, to be fair to it...
define earnest.
To be fair to the campaign, it really does try with absolutely gorgeous visuals. This thing looks absolutely beautiful. And the settings of each level do change up quite a lot. I mean, you go through forests, space stations with zero gravity, futuristic cities, and even the apocalyptic Hellgast homeworld.
Oh, really?
However,
you finished the storyline, by the way.
Yes, I sat through and forced myself to finish it.
All right.
However, all these lovely visual levels are spoiled by terrible, boring design and enemies that in the later campaign that are either completely uninspired and irritating or just bullet sponges. And it's just a bit of a slog for the most part through the campaign. It doesn't help as well that the story flirts with being this really interesting Cold War-style spy thriller that really does touch on these interesting ideas of race and politics, but it just throws these ideas in the toilet to boil down into a terrible, cliched action fucking movie. And it's even worse, the fact that the cutscenes are incredibly clumsy and have absolutely no drama or impact on them. It just feels like you're kind of watching somebody play the game rather than playing the game or even being the character. It just that nothing has any impact. And the way cutscenes transition in and out between gameplay and like story moments is just really awkward, and it feels like things cut off too early, Things are just kind of left hanging, and then you fade back to gameplay. There's no flow, and it really, really damages the dramatic impact of the story overall. I would have to say, ultimately, though, the campaign is mediocre at best. It's not terrible, as much as I've kind of given a bit of a drubbing here. It's not horrendous, and it's not so long that you get sick of it too quickly, I suppose. But it really does just serve as a tech demo for what the PlayStation 4 can do, because it does look absolutely gorgeous at times. However, it's not all bad. Killzone does a number of things right, and the gameplay is pretty damn solid. The shooting is great for the most part. It carries a ton of weight and feels a bit like a first-person Gears of War game, which, in my book, is a good thing. The weapons all feel, look and sound great, and there's plenty to use, and they all have a distinct feel and look and aesthetic to them. And I very much like the fact that the weapons were divided between Vecton and Helghast factions, with each of the factions having a distinct feel. Helghast weapons feel meatier and slower, whereas the Vectons are kind of slightly weaker but a lot more quick and easy to handle. The shooting mechanics are bolstered by the use of gadgets and abilities, and through the campaign you are equipped with this little device called the Owl, which is a bit of a floating drone that has a number of abilities. It can attack enemies with dual machine guns. It can deploy laser cover, energy shields to hide behind. It can hack terminals to let you bypass certain areas, and can even fire out a grappling hook that lets you traverse irregular terrain and get around things much quicker. It's all quite nice, and it works very nicely by flicking the touchpad on the DualShock 4 to switch between these abilities. It's a really good use for the touchpad. In multiplayer, you also have gadgets, and they're opened up to a wider field due to the class system that's in play there. You have things like air defense drones, temporary invisibility, and portable spawn points. So the gadgets basically go really well hand in hand with the solid gunplay. And while I've said that the campaign ultimately flounders, the multiplayer is the saving grace for this game. It is really good. The gameplay, the fact that the gameplay is so solid is ultimately why the multiplayer is so much fun. It's just the combat in this game distilled down into its pure essence. It's I think it's is it 12v12?
I can't remember how much it is actually. It's been a while since I've played on it. I think that sounds about right.
I think
24 playing multiplayer?
I think so. The matches are reasonably large for an arena shooter, and they feel like really aggressive trench warfare that's very much based on attrition. However, to keep things fresh, you're not actually playing standard match types. You're actually playing things called war zones, which are essentially multi-round games that switch up the objective each round to keep players on their toes while throwing fresh challenge at them moment to moment. For example, the first round in a war zone might be just a normal deathmatch where your mission is to kill more enemies than your enemy team. And then all of a sudden it'll switch up to a capture the flag type game where you've got to steal each other's beacons. And then the third one might be a capture and hold territory. And basically it's whoever wins the most rounds wins the overall game. It's really, really dynamic, and it's a lot of fun. It's very fresh and helps further eke out its own identity for this game, rather than falling into kind of like this pit full of generic first-person shooters. I touched on it before, but you can also play as classes in Shadowfall multiplayer with assault, support and recon available to players. Each of them have different weapons available to them and different gadgets, and each of them feel like they have a firm place in the action, and you'll always see a mix of them, which is good because you'll need a mix to be an effective team. One thing I actually particularly liked about this multiplayer is it uses a loadout system very much like Call of Duty or Battlefield, but instead of locking the best weapons behind ridiculous experience grinds, within the first few matches you'll have actually unlocked every weapon type for every class, and it's only the attachments which you need to unlock. And these aren't just ridiculous grinds, they're actually unlocked through challenges. So if you use a shotgun more often, you'll unlock things for your shotgun, and if you use grenades a lot and you're good with grenades, you'll unlock extra things for your grenades. It makes for a much more dynamic and varied unlock system, and it levels the playing field at the same time, and stops new players getting absolutely stomped by more experienced players with better weapons, which is something I absolutely hated in the likes of Call of Duty and initially when I started playing Battlefield. What's even better about the multiplayer is that Guerrilla Games have already said that all future map packs will be free to play. There's no fucking premium service. There's no DLC that you've got to shell £10 for 3 maps anymore. Everything's going to be free, and that means the community's always going to be completely unified in the maps available to them, which is even better for the longevity of this game. When all is said and done, Killzone Shadowfall is a very pretty shooter with solid gameplay that carries its own identity. While the single player does drag it down somewhat, the multiplayer makes up for it, resulting in a game that misses greatness by some margin, but still manages to be a recommendation in the current PlayStation 4 lineup. I'm going to give this a C+. It sounds a bit strange for a recommendation, but the multiplayer is a lot of fun, and there's not a lot of other shooters available for the PlayStation 4 at the moment.
Yeah, sounds about right. I love the multiplayer on this, and I don't think we can go as far as saying how terrible the tutorial level is. I think it's possibly the worst example of gaming that I've ever known. But it looks amazing. You're right, the gameplay. It's such a fun shooter as well. It feels really real, especially in multiplayer. Because I feel like it's bizarre when your multiplayer character has more identity than the campaign character.
Oh my god, Lucas is such a bland fucking character. In fact, there's another character who you meet quite early in the game and it becomes more prominent as the campaign goes on, who is the Helghast agent, the woman. I can't even remember her name, but she's actually far more interesting than Lucas, and she's not explored at all. She might be she might be a main character in the next game or something, but I really don't give a shit.
Well, it's just the meaning. Like, I think you get to name all of your classes, don't you? Or you can name a certain.
You've got like a certain amount of slots, haven't you? That you can do under each kind of class type, and you can create different loadouts.
You can I think up to maybe 4 or 5 per class. You can name the loadout. That's right. And just by giving a loadout a name and a set of weapons, that has more character than Lucas.
Oh, he's such a bland motherfucker. He doesn't even have a face. Literally on the front box, he's a guy with like a face mask and a helmet on. He has absolutely no identity whatsoever. I mean, the Master Chief has way more personality.
Yeah, much more.
He's
a character.
Gordon Freeman has more character than this guy. And he's so generic and bland, and oh my god. Everything about this story, it's a shame because, as I say, it does flirt with some interesting concepts of a kind of race, because the Vectans and the Helghast are both human, but they've almost branched off into different races at this point in history, and it does touch on the ethics of it. And that female character I was talking about is half Vectan, half Helghast. It never really explains why or how that came to be either, and it even goes so far as to bring in a Helghast bigwig later on, the Prime Minister of the Helghast, this woman. I have no idea who she is. I presume she's known to fans, but it also brings her in towards the end and says this half breed is actually her daughter. Never explains why or how. She just is, and then that character disappears, and you're left asking more questions. It also introduces there's a villain comes into it very late on who I have no idea who he is, but I presume he's a villain from the older games as well. It just seems like they've tried a half-arsed rebooting this franchise. It feels like a reboot, but they just have no idea how to tell a story. So it just falls apart.
Yeah. There's no... I mean, I've only played through the first level after the tutorial, and I mean, the gap, the cutscene between the tutorial and the first mission, I just don't know what was happening. First of all, you're on a bridge, and then there's an explosion, and then it's 6 years ago, and then it's now, and then I've just been released from prison, but now they need me on a mission because there's clearly no one else available. And it just felt a bit all over the place, and I've only played 2 hours of single player at most. Which it's really odd because even the first proper level, I'd say the first 2/3 of it, the level design's really bad as well because it's sometimes not clear exactly where you've got to go. I like to have a game where it feels like it's open, but it's still directing you the right way.
Well, the thing is, the amount of time
3 was top for that.
Well, the thing is, the amount of time I spent wandering around, wondering where the fuck I should be going. What's even worse is there's waypoints on the screen, and they're just so bad that it doesn't give you any idea of where you actually need to go. If you need to get to point B, say, it'll just put the waypoint on point B. It'll not actually guide you through these winding corridors that loop back on each other. it'll just say, right, then you need to get over there. It's 100 meters that way, and there's like 6 different ways you can turn, and it doesn't give you any indication which is the right way, and it's just very, very irritating. And it's even worse when you've got, later in the campaign, when you've got enemies with energy shields on them that just take a battering.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my god, I really had to sit down and force myself to finish it. I was never...
I can imagine that's how I would have to do it.
Yeah, what's even more irritating is I was like, why am I sitting here playing this campaign when I could just flick over to the multiplayer and actually enjoy myself? Because the multiplayer is a lot of fun. It's really fun.
I've enjoyed every second of playing the multiplayer on this game. It feels like we've been playing Battlefield 4 a bit more recently, but as like when we first got the PlayStation, this was our only game. This feels so heavy, and because there's no vehicles or anything, it almost feels grittier than Battlefield. It feels almost more World War II-ish, World War One-ish, because you're not relying on, or you not have to worry about a tank coming around the corner. It's literally you against the guy in the opposite trench. That's your only worry.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the amount of times where you just kind of buckled down and held a position, and it was so intense. It was like when you're firing a gun, just like the kind of the muzzle flash, and the sound of it, and the atmosphere of the levels, because they're always moody and dilapidated, or in the rain or something. It just feels really, really good, and the classes are very varied. Like I don't really play on recon that much, but the support and the assault I'll switch between depending on the situation. They're all, even though I don't play on recon much, they still have a place. They're very useful for support and covering positions from a distance.
Yeah. I've been playing recon a lot more than you. I'd flip between recon and assault. I'd rarely play support on this. But like, everyone can find their own niche, and the nice thing is that no one class seems massively overpowered, apart from what don't we like?
I don't like recons with fucking invisibility.
Yeah, that's the ones. What do we call them? Pussies.
Pussies. I'm sick of pussies.
Yeah,
they need to come out and fight.
Because I play a lot of recon, and I've never used invisibility once, even though I've got it. It just
maybe you should.
No, I'm not.
It's
pussy.
Obviously very good because they always keep killing me. But
that to me is the major overpowered thing. But you can also get overpowered air drones that seem just like if you see one, you're dead. But for it's such a good multiplayer. It's
not perfectly balanced, but it's not ridiculous either. You know, there's still fun to be had. That's which is the main thing, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did have a lot of fun with the multiplayer. Some of the levels are really good. There's not really that many bad levels as far as I can tell. There's some I'm not that keen on in comparison to others, but there's none I'll just quit on because they're just ridiculous. They're nice. Again, the multiplayer levels are nice and varied and are pulled from certain areas of the game.
Do you know what else is good? The multiplayer. When you get other games like Battlefield and especially in Halo, when you just like every single match you play is on Valkyrie, for example.
Yeah, that doesn't happen here at all.
No, you can normally if you're sitting down for 8 matches or however many maps there are, you're going to play most of them if you just play for an hour.
Yeah.
If you have a couple games, you're normally going to be on a different map each time, which I've really liked.
Yeah, it was good. It kept things flowing, and I also really like the war zones because it just keeps things moving and keeps them constantly changing, and it rewards good teamwork because you can't just rely on one strategy constantly. You're going to have to switch up in like 5 minutes when you go from deathmatch to capture the flag, or you go from, what was that, like when you're both fighting over the beacon, there's only one beacon, you got to steal it to get the first team to steal it. There's loads of different strategies, and different game types often call for you to change up your class and your loadout as well to be more effective. I just really like it. It's very dynamic and very varied.
It can, just changing your class can just change the course of a deathmatch game as well, because we found just changing tactics. It's a very tactical game for an FPS. Well, especially for an FPS that isn't like a Battlefield, where there's no real reason for tactics other than to kill. So you can find yourself playing the game, you're losing, and then me and Ben were like, we'll just go around this side for the next 10 minutes, and then within that 10 minutes, you can see the scores just change just because you're trying something new. I've never played a game quite like it.
However, at the same time, there are some things I didn't like about it. The fact that to get the scoreboard up, you have to basically pause the game and go through a few menus. The scoreboard's not that clear. It's not great for that. There's some odd menu choices in this game, the way they lay it out and everything. Something I did like though is how friends can play together. You can't party up as such, which is It's a bit irritating, but what you can do is one person jumps into a playlist and the other person can follow them in straight away, and it'll pair you up into a team and everything. So it's quite dynamic in that. But
well, if you've got party chat already activated, which normally you're going to at that point, it's not so much of an issue. I mean, we've never encountered that as a problem so far, but at least it's better than Battlefield, where there just doesn't seem to be any sort of connection between friends.
Yeah, well, that's it. By comparison, it is much better. And another thing, it's just something to point out, it's not really an issue now, but when the game shipped, it didn't actually have voice comms, so you couldn't talk to your teammates. That was patched in about a month later, but it just
on Battlefield?
No, in Killzone.
Oh, really?
But because we were always in party chat, we never noticed it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
But you couldn't just go into a game. But that's now been patched in. But just as a public service announcement, in order to activate it, you have to go into the options and switch it on. Because even though they've patched it in, it's off by default. Because who the fuck? Exactly, who the fuck knows what was going through their head? So while this single player is pretty bollocks. Like I'm just going to put it out there. And some of the menu choices that creep in a multiplayer are questionable, such as the always off voice chat that was patched in after launch. This is generally a pretty damn solid shooter, and it's very different from Call of Duty and Battlefield.
I think if you're a Battlefield or Call of Duty player, you're going to struggle playing this because it's so much heavier.
Yeah, it's a lot more slow-paced. It's a lot more... You need to dig in and hold your position. It's a lot more infantry-based. I think Call of Duty's more twitch, and Battlefield is just... It's just a different beast altogether, Battlefield.
Yeah. It's not really fair to compare it anymore.
No, it's so much... kind of off on a tangent. But I had a lot of fun with this game. I'm still playing it on and off. I love the fact that all map packs in the future will be free. That's just such a relief. Well, it's not maybe such a relief, but it's such a bonus after having spent... Yeah. I mean, the trouble with map packs is I've spent money on map packs before on the likes of Halo, and I've never played the maps just because nobody else has them.
Yeah, that is a real problem. And even times when... because they're kept in a playlist on their own, and that's sometimes got such a low population, and then sometimes you just never get to play them even if you want to.
Yeah. So the fact that they're going to be free and keeping the community unified is great in my eyes. So yeah, I think as I say, C+ in my book sounds like a low rating, but I think if you're just looking for something a bit different, something a bit more meaty as far as a shooter goes, something that isn't your fucking yearly annual releases like Call of Duty and Battlefield, then yeah, go with this. Just don't expect too much from the campaign. Hell, just fucking play the multiplayer and you'll have a blast, especially if you've got friends who are buying it as well.
Your beliefs have failed. They have led you into the wilderness, alone, without faith.
This is Vector. This is our home, and it always will be. I want you to remember that.